What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you the Week 15 running back rankings. Welcome to the playoffs, fellas. You guys have made it. This is crunch time. This is when we need to be sharp on our decision making. We want to pay attention to every factor, usage, matchups, etc. I will be covering all of that in today's video. Our rankings right now are free. If you want to go to the link in the description, if you're just looking for a quick start sit question, you can check out the link in the description. This guy over that guy, you'll see that play out in the rankings. They are totally free to do so. I'm going over my top 24 running backs on the week in depth today, and then the remaining guys will be available in the rankings, like I said. If you guys do enjoy this video at any point, please hit the like button. It helps us grow, helps us out tremendously. Also, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we post a new video, and comment any of your thoughts down below as well. We officially have launched channel memberships as of Monday, so if you guys want to support us, it costs you about a Starbucks coffee a month to do so, and you get some perks, obviously, from doing that: priority responses to comments, badges, emojis, etc., etc. So, without further ado, guys, we're going to hit the intro. Okay, so as always, as you guys can see on the screen, these are the Week 15 running back matchups. I will leave this over my shoulder so that you guys can make reference to them throughout the video. As you guys can see, Myles Gaskin, the Rams running back, the Cowboys running backs, Elijah Mitchell, James Conner, etc. Those guys have the better matchups this week, whereas Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Zach Moss, Saquon Barkley, Chuba Hubbard, those guys have a bit worse of matchups. So we're going to start with the top 6 running backs as I go 6 at a time like I did last week if you guys watched that video. We're going to start with RB1 on the week, and it's Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor. We know his role. We know how he can impact this game. We know how good he is. The narrative that will be flying is that Belichick takes away your best weapon. Definitely qualifies as Jonathan Taylor being the best weapon for the Indianapolis Colts, so the Patriots will probably hone in on him. But at the same time, the Patriots are 26th in receiving points allowed to fantasy running backs, and we've seen Jonathan Taylor involved in the passing game more and more, and especially in the screen game as well. So maybe he does a little bit more damage in the passing game than we're used to. But I think regardless, Jonathan Taylor has been the focus of defenses for going against the Indianapolis Colts for weeks and months now, and he's still been producing. So I don't really care that he's going to be the primary focus of Bill Belichick, because I don't think the Patriots defense, as good as they are, can take away Jonathan Taylor. Now, let's get into the running back 2 overall. Dalvin Cook, he gave up a big middle finger, a big fuck you to everybody on Thursday that was saying not to play him, to play Madison instead. Whatever the case is, finishes the RB1 on the week on a bum shoulder. Tougher matchup this week, of course, but he's out there for you regardless. Nobody was going to sit Dalvin Cook after the week he had last week. Of course, make sure to monitor practice reports, though, to make sure he is okay, and he is 100% for this game. Austin Eckler, number 3 running back on the week. Austin Eckler and the Chargers find themselves in the best game script and the best matchup of the week from an over-under perspective. The Chiefs are allowing top 6 receiving production to the running back position, and this game, like I said, has a 52.5 point over-under. Chiefs and Chargers could be a lot of points in this one. You definitely want pieces of that game, and Austin Eckler definitely qualifies. We don't know 100% if Keenan Allen is going to be back for this game, but even if Keenan Allen is back, you were going to start Eckler anyway. Number 4 is Alvin Kamara. Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara will be the focus of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers stopping the run this week, and we know that the Buccaneers are very equipped to do that. But the big thing for Alvin Kamara is he can contribute as a pass catcher. We saw even last week with Taysom Hill as his quarterback, he still saw 5 targets, and we've seen running backs take advantage of this Buccaneers defense through the passing game all season. Myles Gaskin actually had 10 targets against them back in week 6 or week 7. Alvin Kamara should be able to produce regardless of the tough matchup on the ground against the Buccaneers defense. Number 5, speaking of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we have Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette also in a tough matchup because the Saints are no slouch against the run themselves. They're actually one of the best against the fantasy running back position. But again, pass catching work, goal line opportunities, red zone work, that all attributes itself to the fact that Leonard Fournette is pretty much a matchup-proof running back at this point. We saw a couple weeks ago against the Indianapolis Colts. It was touchdowns, red zone work, and receiving production that led him to that huge game. And the Colts were no slouch run defense in their own right. So the final running back in the top 6 for me this week is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon has seeded work in the passing game, the routes, the 2-minute drill snaps, etc., to Samaje Perine in recent weeks. And I don't know if that's due to game script or if that's due to the fact that he was coming into this week's game with an illness. I don't really know why that's happening. If it's because they want to preserve him a little bit more, I don't know. It could be all of those factors combined. But regardless, the Bengals run at a very high rate. This matchup isn't the best, but it's still exploitable for Joe Mixon. So he's a guy I have absolutely no qualms about starting as a top 6 running back this week. Now let's get into running back 7 to 12. Of course, these guys have a little bit more question marks than the top end guys that I talked about already. Najee Harris, of course, does not have any question marks, though, outside of how efficient he's going to be and how good the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is going to be that week, because he has the safest role in fantasy. He's a 95% snap share running back. So regardless, you are going to be firing him up. So my number 8 running back is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb doesn't usually find himself this high in my rankings, and he definitely could slide down with all this Browns news. We have Baker Mayfield officially testing positive for COVID. Jarvis Landry's out with COVID, most likely. And we also have a number of other Browns players testing positive for COVID, and the list kind of just keeps getting bigger by the minute. So with Jarvis, with Hunt, and with Baker all in question for this game on Saturday, I think the commitment to Nick Chubb, if he plays and, everything is, hunky-dory, we got Case Keenum starting at quarterback and no other, major pieces on offense go out with COVID. This is a top 3 matchup for Nick Chubb, and I think he's going to get a big-time workload. Him and Dearness Johnson will probably split work in the passing game, but Nick Chubb is a guy that I think is a top 10 start if everything kind of holds pat as the news stands right now. But again, if things continue to get worse, maybe Kareem Hunt is back for this game, I'll slide Nick Chubb down towards that RB13, RB14 range where he typically finds himself. Now, Antonio Gibson, my RB9, and just for the record, for those of you guys that are wondering, the rank I have these guys ordered is the order in which I would start them. So if you have Nick Chubb and Antonio Gibson, as of right now, I lean starting Nick Chubb over Gibson. But if we get some more news, then Gibson will find himself ahead of Chubb, just for your reference. Gibson definitely saw a fall from grace last week. Of course, everybody played him. If you guys were playing DFS, he was the highest owned running back on the entire slate, but I'm not worried about Antonio Gibson's workload whatsoever. He played 68% of the snaps in this game, but he was punished for a fumble, a costly fumble. Otherwise, he would have been up near that 80% range, because after he fumbled, he didn't see about 15, 20 plays until the game started to get a little bit closer. JD McKissic should be back this week. It is a concussion that he's dealing with, so they're sometimes finicky, but you don't usually see players miss multiple weeks with a concussion. He missed 2 games so far. I'd expect him probably to be back for this week, but this Eagles matchup is much easier than the Cowboys was last week. The Cowboys are actually one of the better run defenses in the league, due in part to guys like Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory up front. It sounds like Taylor Heineke should be able to play in this game. And like I said, the Eagles are very exploitable against the run. So even if JD McKissic is back, I still think that Antonio Gibson is a top 10 running back. And if JD McKissic is out again, he's going to find himself up in my top 3, top 5 running backs on the week, because I know his workload was awful last week, but it was a much harder matchup than we're dealing with in this game. So RB10 on the week, David Montgomery. DeMont records another week of 84% of the snaps, also most of the valuable work, 74% of the routes, most of the carries, 22% target share, all of the inside the 5 work, all of the long down and distance and 2-minute drill work as well. Justin Fields is playing better than any Bears quarterback has played to this point in the season, in my opinion. Again, like that's, not completely cut and dry, but his PFF grades in terms of a passing production and just offense production in general have gone up as the season has gone along. Justin Fields is getting a little bit more comfortable back there, and that can only increase Montgomery's efficiency as well as Montgomery's scoring potential. And again, this is another matchup for David Montgomery that profiles as a pretty easy one. The Minnesota Vikings are pretty banged up. Justin Fields should be able to move the ball in offense, and that in turn is good news for David Montgomery. Even though the Vikings are a little bit easier against the pass than they are the run, I really like David Montgomery this week as a top 10 running back. Elijah Mitchell, my number 11 running back, he isn't 100% confirmed to play. So of course, if he doesn't play, he falls out of this range, but monitor his practice reports. He is dealing with a concussion and a knee injury as well. If he can go against this Falcons defense, which I do expect him to be able to, this defense has been brutal against the run, ranking top 5 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, and recording back-to-back weeks of season high usage for Elijah Mitchell before he suffered that injury gives me all the confidence I need to throw him into my lineup as a top 12 running back play. James Conner, my number 12 running back, he would be a lot higher on this list if it weren't for Chase Edmonds likely coming back this week. James Conner played a season high 96% of the snaps on Monday and saw his best game as a receiver. So with James Conner, if Chase Edmonds is out for this game, James Conner will find himself inside my top 6 running backs against the Detroit Lions, because this matchup is extremely easy. Of course, we saw what both of the Broncos running backs did to this team just a week ago. The matchup that he has, he's still in high-end RB2 range, even if Edmonds is back. But because Edmonds is coming off a multi-week absence, we don't expect him to get a huge workload. So Conner should be still the primary back, 65, 70% of the opportunities, in my opinion. But if Edmonds is out, he jumps up into my top 6 around that Joe Mixon range for the week. Now, let's get into running backs 13 through 18. Again, the more we go down this list, the more question marks we're going to have about these guys. Saquon Barkley versus the Dallas Cowboys this week. Saquon saw a downtick in his snaps this past week, but they were getting killed, and he handled 69% of the snaps and 88% of the carries before the fourth quarter when the game was out of reach and they kind of just threw Devontae Booker out there a little bit more. So as you guys can see, that blip on Saquon's usage radar is a little bit, skewed by the fact that they were getting killed in this game. Now, there is a possibility that Saquon Barkley and the Giants aren't very competitive again this week against the Dallas Cowboys, who are, as good of a team as the Chargers were last week. But nonetheless, I do think Saquon Barkley probably is just fine in this game. RB 13 for me on the week, given the usage and given the ability that we saw. And we finally got into the end zone for the first time in like 7 games. So that is great news for Saquon Barkley. Number 14, Josh Jacobs, who I talked about yesterday. He has leveled up in his usage in recent weeks, even in a horrible game script, right? For Josh Jacobs, we knew the narrative for a while was when the Raiders are winning, Josh Jacobs is good. When the Raiders are losing, Josh Jacobs is not good. But since Kenyon Drake's injury, this matchup, even though it's not the greatest against the Browns, does favor a guy like Josh Jacobs because the Raiders are expecting probably to be ahead in this game with all the Browns injuries, no starting quarterback, most likely a lot of the weapons and some of the defensive pieces as well, potentially out for this game. I really, really like Josh Jacobs this week. From a fantasy perspective, you definitely have seen the usage increase since Kenyon Drake's injury, up near 73% of the snaps last week, 69% of the carries, 59% of the routes, and finally playing long down and distance and 2-minute drill snaps. We had never seen that to this point in Josh Jacobs' career until really John Gruden has been fired. So the fact that Josh Jacobs is finally getting the pass catching work and finally getting the 2-minute drill work that we knew he was capable of getting coming out of Alabama that just never materialized in the NFL, that is definitely great news for his bottom line. Seen a couple targets each of the last 3 games, 9, 4, and 6 targets in the last 3 games. So he is a guy that I'm absolutely firing up with confidence as a top 15 running back this week. Number 15 is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones sees yet another concerning week of his usage. So from Josh Jacobs, who's seeing great usage, we go to a concerning side of the coin. I love that Aaron Jones gets valuable usage, right? He gets the targets, routes, 2-minute drills, most of the inside the 5 work, but 20% of the rush attempts is very concerning. The fact that coming off of the bye week, he's had 2 weeks to rest. They, go out there and they use AJ Dillon as much as they did on the ground. It is definitely something to monitor, but efficiency should sustain RB2 production for Aaron Jones as it has really for his entire career in Green Bay. He's always been a guy that's relied on efficiency. So I have no problems starting Aaron Jones, but I am definitely concerned that he won't get back up to that top 5, top 8 running back range the rest of the season because the usage simply isn't there. They're using AJ Dillon a lot more than, in my opinion, they should. And I know AJ Dillon's a great running back too, but I still think Aaron Jones is the better running back and he should be on the field a little bit more than he currently is, up near that 60-70% range of the Packers opportunities. So moving on to another guy that obviously saw a depressing downtick in his usage was Javonte Williams, who's my RB16 on the week. And I can kind of lump him and Melvin Gordon, who's my RB18, together in this conversation. And the realization that Melvin Gordon is still a factor, he's still going to be a factor, is definitely a tough pill to swallow for people who have Javonte Williams, including myself. But there is 2 bright spots. Number 1, Melvin Gordon has been dealing with injuries up and down. He's an older running back, from his hip to his hand to whatever injuries he's dealing with. There is still chance that he misses time here and there, and we get Javonte RB1 season in the weeks that it matter most. But number 2, even with Melvin Gordon on the field, Javonte Williams has a stranglehold of the receiving work, which is very important for this Broncos offense because down the stretch, they don't have the Detroit Lions every week because the Detroit Lions are an anemic offense. They were missing so many pieces. It shouldn't be surprising that Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams were able to just run it down their throat because they're a bad run defense and the game script was in favor of the Broncos, but the Broncos aren't a very good team. So against the Bengals this week, against the Chargers in a couple weeks, you got to expect that Javonte Williams, being the guy that has the receiving workload, is going to be the more valuable running back. And this week, especially against Cincinnati, I expect them to put up points. So give me the guy that is getting the long down and distance, 2-minute drill snaps, and the primary target share in the offense, not as much the guy that is getting the early down work in a game last week that should have been, easy to foresee that he was going to have a good game because the Broncos were in a great game script for a guy like Melvin Gordon to be able to run the ball. And number 17, Cordarrelle Patterson, he's begun ceding a little bit of work in the passing game, especially to Mike Davis, has to downgrade Cordarrelle Patterson a little bit to me. So before he was a guy that was in that fringe top 12, top 15 range, I trust the usage for every other player. And yes, Cordarrelle Patterson is an outlier to some extent, but at the same time, this guy hasn't played over 50% of the snaps since week 9. And this is the Atlanta Falcons offense. So it's not like we're getting a super efficient offense where a limited workload can go a long way. Cordarrelle Patterson basically has to do everything himself. He has to be efficient, break off big plays, etc. himself, because this offense isn't going to do him any favors. His offensive line isn't going to do him any favors. Matt Ryan isn't going to do him any favors. And of course, his usage isn't to the level of a top 15, top 12 running back like he's been to this point in the year. So 50% type snap share running back, not exactly the guy that I want to be putting inside my top 12 running backs for the week. And RB17 is really the highest I'm willing to start him. Like I said, with my RB18, Melvin Gordon, also a good start this week with a great matchup against the Bengals run defense, but a team committed to getting him 16 to 21 touches, albeit not really in the passing game as much. The game script doesn't favor him as much as it does Javonte Williams. So I would rather start Javonte Williams, even though Melvin Gordon is still a fine start this week as well. Now let's close the video out with RBs 19 to 24. Of course, these guys are going to have the most question marks, and we're kicking it off with a bang. Obviously, I talked about Ezekiel Elliott yesterday as a guy with big time question marks. Zeke just does not look the same right now. And he's getting good usage for pretty much the majority of the season and recently as well, especially in the passing game. He's just not being efficient with it. He's averaging, he hasn't had a game in like 7 weeks over 4 yards a carry. He's not, he's getting six target games and failing to exceed 36 receiving yards. So what you're getting with Zeke Elliott is a volume play only. This is money time in the fantasy season. And while Zeke has a good matchup this week against the Giants, the Cowboys offense isn't moving the ball at the level that we need it to sustain Zeke Elliott's poor efficiency. Because if Zeke Elliott was inefficient, like Najee Harris is inefficient, but he was getting goal line opportunities and scoring potential, then it wouldn't be a big problem. But the fact that the Cowboys are not playing all that well on offense right now is an issue for a guy like Zeke Elliott, who might have Tony Pollard back for this week as well. Tony Pollard was practicing today on Wednesday, which is a little odd. I didn't think he would be, but he is practicing today. So that is, kind of a downgrade for Zeke Elliott. And you could even make the argument that I have him too high as well. So Zeke Elliott, a guy that I'm not 100% confident in starting this week, despite the good matchup. My RB20 on the week, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He did punch the ball into the end zone twice last week against the Las Vegas Raiders. But as I talked about yesterday, Clyde Edwards-Helaire does not get the usage of a running back that I want to be putting into my lineup each and every week. He is a touchdown dependent guy. He's going to get, 10 to 12, 10 to 15 carries at most, maybe 2 to 3, 4 targets at most. And you have to hope for him having scoring opportunities, which is a fair assessment to make because he does play for the Kansas City Chiefs. But at the same time, the game script that they had last week was completely in favor of the run. They were able to just run it down their throat. And the Raiders in general also are much better against the pass than they are against the run. Clyde Edwards-Helaire going up against the Chargers this week also have that kind of bill of defense where the Chargers are much better against the pass than they are the run. But I do think the Chiefs are going to have to throw the ball a lot more in this game than they did last week. They didn't have to throw a whole lot because they were generating turnovers. They were getting short fields and things of that nature. I don't think Justin Herbert is going to just lie down and die like the Las Vegas Raiders did last week. So I think the passing game is the more valuable part of this offense. And that obviously favors a guy like Darrell Williams for the week, but I'm not going to be starting him over Clyde Edwards-Helaire because we've seen when Clyde is on the field, he at least gets like 15 carries. It's just not sometimes the most efficient or the most valuable touches like we want to see him get 2-minute drill snaps and long down and distance and goal line work consistently, which just frankly doesn't happen right now. So number 21, Sony Michel, and Sony Michel fits in right here, assuming Darrell Henderson is playing. That's why I have Sony Michel ranked at 21. If Darrell Henderson is out again, then I will move Sony Michel up near the Broncos running backs or even a little bit ahead of that. That's probably where he would settle into my rankings. Henderson should be back this week, if I had to guess. So he's on the COVID list. Sounds like he would have played last week if it wasn't for the COVID list issue. So this is going to affect this backfield in some way. Now, I have no idea how it's going to affect this backfield. I don't know if Sony Michel is the workhorse back now and Darrell Henderson's going to play, but be used sparingly. I could see that happening. I could also see it happening where Darrell Henderson comes back and he returns to his old role. And Sony Michel is now the handcuff that he's been the past 2 weeks, only, just behind Darrell Henderson when he's on the field. So I can see one of those two opposite sides of the extreme playing out. As of right now, Sony Michel is a very risky RB2 start if Darrell Henderson plays, but I have him at RB21 because he's still going to have some value even if Darrell Henderson is active because he is coming off of a multi-week absence. And there's a chance that even if Henderson does play and they do intend to give Henderson his full role, they might ease him in to some extent. So Sony Michel, if Darrell Henderson is out, obviously an auto start, but if he plays, he is a guy that I'm a little bit more hesitant to start in my flex position of my lineup. So number 22, and speaking of guys that I'm hesitant to start, James Robinson. Now, when you look at this chart, the underlying usage was solid, right? 64% of the snaps, 75% of the rush attempts, 49% of the routes, but the result was 6 carries for 4 yards and 0 targets for James Robinson. This offense is bad. This team in general is complete in disarray with the Urban Meyer, speculation and news going on. If you can help not starting James Robinson, I absolutely would not start him. And he'll continue to slide down my rankings as we get news about other running backs behind him, potentially coming back from injuries and things like that, like Myles Gaskin, like the Patriots running backs, like Jamal Williams, etc. I just don't have a lot of confidence in James Robinson given the current state of the Jags offense. James Robinson is obviously a good player, but that can only take you so far. If your offense is terrible, your quarterback is terrible, your play calling is terrible, then chances are you're not going to be very good for fantasy. And number 23 is Rashad Penny. And I think you could make the argument for sure that you would start him over a guy like James Robinson. Rashad Penny is such an interesting case, though. As I talked about yesterday, I am trusting Penny heading into this playoff run, but I'm not going overboard. I'm trusting Rashad Penny as a guy that can get 15 to 20 touches in this offense and be a guy that is a middling RB2, but I don't think he can be a full-blown RB1 workhorse. I don't think he's going to get, the full extent of the Chris Carson role. As you guys can see on the screen, 57% of the snaps or so is what he saw last week. This is a guy that is going to be the primary ball carrier for sure, but we don't know if Adrian Peterson, Travis Homer are going to make an impact into his touch baseline when they already have guys like Alex Collins and DJ Dallas. Now, those guys aren't high competition. They're not guys that I expect them to just directly out-touch Rashad Penny. I think Rashad Penny has shown enough that they're going to give him the primary workload, but those guys will be used to some extent. And this matchup against the Rams is not nearly as good or as fruitful as the one against Houston was last week, where Penny broke off 2 huge runs, obviously en route to the top 3 running back finish that he was on the week. Now, running back 24 currently right now, Ramondre Stevenson is my running back 24. And again, he would be up near those Broncos running backs if I knew Damian Harris was out, but it does sound like Damian Harris is going to try and play this week, coming off of a hamstring injury against the Buffalo Bills before the bye week. Then, of course, the Patriots have a bye. He's had, 12 days to recover or whatever since that injury. If Ramondre Stevenson is alone in this backfield and Damian Harris is out, he is going to be up near my top 15, top 12 running backs on the week. If Damian Harris is out, like I said, though, Ramondre Stevenson will see himself a lot higher in these rankings. And I think even, without Damian Harris out, you could make the argument to start him over a guy like James Robinson. And I'll just quickly touch on a couple guys that missed out because we're awaiting news from them, or we're just awaiting certain situations and some uncertainty. Of course, Myles Gaskin is on the COVID list. If he does play, he will be inside my top 20 running backs or so because he has the New York Jets. Very, very easy matchup for him. DeAndre Swift / Jamal Williams. Again, we don't know if DeAndre Swift is going to play this week. I tend to think he probably won't. And if he doesn't, we got to expect Jamal Williams probably off of the COVID list at this point in time by the time we get to Sunday. So if Jamal Williams plays, I'd probably throw him in as my RB22 or my RB21 just ahead of that Sony Michel, James Robinson range, because I know his workload a little bit more secure than those other guys. And I think he can get a little bit more usage in the passing game than we saw before he went out with COVID, because I don't think Godwin, Igwe-Bike, and Jamar Jefferson did a whole lot to show that they're going to indent his role whatsoever. And Jamal Williams should be able to take over the Craig Reynolds role from last week. And then Michael Carter coming off IR this week. I'd like to wait and see before I throw him into my lineup, but not a terrible start as a top 30 running back. And then Devontae Freeman just missed out of the top 24 running backs, mainly due to the fact that Lamar Jackson might not play. Now, if Lamar Jackson plays, I think you could move Devontae Freeman up near 20, 21 around there and start him over some of these backup running backs in good spots right now. So that's kind of where I see the running back landscape for week 15 of fantasy football. If you guys did enjoy this video, please hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you're interested in supporting us in any way, check out Underdog Fantasy, promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit. You'll get 100% match back bonus on whatever you deposit. You can also become a YouTube member by going to our YouTube page and hitting that join button. $3 and something cents American. It is $4.99 Canadian for you guys to join that. So make sure if you guys do want to support us, you check that out. You'll get some emojis, priority response to comments, and some other cool perks from that. So peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.